Okay, good afternoon. I know that we're still out on Martin Luther King's holiday vacation, so there's no class today, but there's been a number of questions that have come in about the subject, so I thought maybe just a quick little video explaining a couple of the pieces of it may help for those who are still working on their assignment. Now, if you've already turned your assignment in, no worries about that. Again, the initial first assignment is to kind of see where the class is at in general, to know whether I need to spend more time or less time on a particular subject. And so I can kind of tailor the pace of the class in order to match that. So one of the questions had come up a number of times, and despite the posting to the week one forum about lift and gains, was about that concept of lift. What is lift? How is it used in this context? And so I'd say lift really has two different types of descriptions here. So first of all, from the CRM, the marketing side of this, it's really the measurement of an increase in order or sales in response to some form of advertising or promotion. So if you think about it, if you're having a series of marketing campaigns and you want to measure the effectiveness of that, what you might do first is to have three smaller offers to similar groups of people. So from your total net universe, you'll sample down. You'll sample into smaller groups. You'll do a couple of test marketing efforts, such as a rebate offer or something along those lines, and then you'll see how many people respond to that offer. Now, measurement of how many is a good number, or a number that have been response back is a good response to it, really depends on industry by product. But let's just say, for argument's sake, the three smaller efforts, if you average the number of people that responded for each of those, you get an average of those three of about 10%. Well, then that kind of sets the expectation. If you marketed it to a larger group, if all things are equal, you'd expect to see around a 10% return on that as well. So that's how we're coming up from a marketing perspective. What would be the measurement? What would be the KPI that would go along with lift? Now, lift is also used to talk about the effectiveness of, or the model effectiveness of a predictive model. So that's typically the gain and lift chart that comes out, that's also described. And so what that measures is just the result with the model and without the model. And so if you look at the difference between the two of them, you can kind of see this is the effectiveness of using the model versus not using the model. So that again could also come into play as you answer some of the questions for the week. Does it make sense for you to do something? Well, if you've done one of these type of initial series of marketing campaigns, then you can come back and you could say what was the lift and look at the lift chart to kind of determine with the model, without the model. Well, I see with a model, it could potentially make sense. So if you're going to expand that model, you're going to build upon that model, you can see that there'd be value before you continue to invest in something that you may need to modify or take a different approach with. Now, as far as calculating lift, one of the things which can be helpful to you probably would be just to lay it out very clearly like this. So I'll show you one example. I won't walk through the whole solution right now, again, because I have a couple of students who are still answering. But let's say an example of telemarketing. If you have $3 per person with a population size of around 50,000 and assuming a 10% lift, as we've talked about before, if you kind of categorize it like this, it makes it really easy for you to see the calculation for it. So we know the cost per person is $3. We know we're going to send it out to a net universe or population size of 50,000 people. So in order to find that projected lift, we take the 10%, 0.1, take that times the population size, and that's going to give you the projected lift. So we're expecting to see 5,000 in return as far as that projected lift. Total program cost, that's going to be A times B. So if you take the cost of the program, the cost of the person times the total number of people you send it to, it's going to cost about 150,000 in order to do that. So then dividing those two numbers, the projected lift and the total cost per program, you're going to see it's around 30 bucks is what's the cost per lift. And so if you do that for the other two programs, very quickly you'll be able to see which one makes the most sense. What's the one that's going to be the lowest cost, or what's the one that's you would take it to which one would be the lowest cost, but you could, if you were also looking to which one would reach the most people, you could talk about those two as well. For this exercise, it's really about what's going to be the cheapest per cost. So talking about those questions specifically, first one is not all data science efforts or not all efforts are worth doing. So if you build out a predictive model, it's going to take time, it's going to take money. So before you do it, it's really smart to ask up front, is there going to be value? It's going to be return on your investment, or ROI. So the core question comes back to, what's the business question you're trying to answer? Is that question clear? What data is available to you? Have you tried other efforts like this in the past? So as you're responding to this question, think about that. Think about reasons why it would not make sense for you to do that. If the lift was too small, that may be an example of one. Questions 2 and 3 are simply a lift calculation. And again, using that information I just shared, you should be able to answer those with no problem. Question 4 talks about limits and limitations. So let's say they give you some, very limited number of data elements, or a small subset like customer data. Well, there's some things you can do with that, but there's a whole lot of other things you probably can't do with that. So if they say, hey, listen, you've got access to our customer database, but you can't see the orders for those customers, it would limit you into the types of analysis, the types of models that you could build off of it. So that's really what this question is asking. It's talking about the limitations. So if you have just a customer data, or just a small subset of data, what can you do? What's possible? What's not possible? And also think forward to, if you were going to get other kinds of data, what would you ask for? So if you said, hey, listen, by giving me the customer data, I can show you some basic demographics, but if you gave me access to the orders, then I could do a much more holistic predictive model out of it. And so that's what that question is asking. Finally, question 5 wraps it all up. So it gives you some numbers about a potential study. Create a couple of paragraphs just explaining how you would convince somebody in your company in order to support such an effort. And so this is just a pitch. So if you've got the data, you can see that there's value. Demonstrate how there's going to be value, where that's going to be added, what would be the reason why somebody would cut a check and give you some money in order to do this work. And that's simply it. So this takes you all the way from the beginning to asking the question, should we be doing this? What specifically can we do? What kind of data do we have available to us? To calculate lift, as we'll see, we'll get into the course. That'll be something that you could come back and use as well. And then finally, wrapping it all up, the pitch of how you would pitch this back out to somebody. So again, just a couple of set of questions here just to see where you're currently at, see where you may be struggling. Hopefully this helps. If you still have questions, please reach out. And if you're still working on the assignment, please try to complete that up in the next couple of days. And the office hours on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. If you still have questions, come to the office hours. I'd be happy to sit down and run through the questions in more detail, or your specific questions that you may have had. I can answer those too as well. So hopefully this helps. Please reach out if you still have questions. Thanks. Bye.